I think most of us want to get back to a world where we can disagree with each other, have honest disagreements, but not make it personal, not get angry with each other. And yet every time there's an incident, even like is going on right now, that might bring us back together, we seem to not be able to help ourselves. And in fairness, Jeff Zucker, the head of CNN, responded to the president in kind, putting the blame back on him. Is there any hope for us to get the national discourse back to a place we would like it to be?
Well, I think there is, and I think it starts with the fact that most of us want to get to the bottom of whomever is behind this deplorable, very dangerous act of domestic terrorism. And we don't necessarily want to point the finger and blame President Trump, the Republicans in Congress, members of the media, or anyone else. As Americans, we want to find out who did it and hold them accountable.
So answer this for me, because you're an elected official. So you've run campaigns. You've won campaigns. Do people do this because it works? That is to say, they get very personal, they get very over the top, sometimes the rhetoric, because the voters respond to that and they don't respond to a moderate voice?
I think that there was a time when the negative campaigning in commercials was a way to accentuate divisions or differences between you and your opponent. Now, I think with the news media cycle just so accelerated, and with social media playing an even bigger role, and the incentives on social media to say things that are bombastic and that are turbulent, that, I think, has created a dynamic where those in office and those who evaluate those in office place more emphasis and value on those that are saying divisive things. Ultimately, though, that leads to much more destructive discourse. And I think it also turns a lot of people off to politics, and thereby those that are doing that have bigger and bigger microphones. So
let's turn to some substance, some policy, as it were, especially with health care. We have a speech coming out from President Trump this afternoon in which we know, because his Secretary of HHS has really telegraphed it, that he's really going to propose some things on drug pricing in particular, about having more competition to get the price of drugs down. How important is this to people? Because if we do polls, the polls indicate that people really care about health care. Will they vote on that come November 6th?
A couple things. One, in any polls, you'll usually see that the economy and jobs and health care are always the number 1 and 2 issue, unless we're in a time of national emergency or there's some really front and center national security issues. On health care specifically, Democrats are going to run against the Republican health care plan that we voted on. Republicans, I think, want to highlight the pocketbook issues related to health care costs. And in the pharmaceutical drug space, already we've seen the FDA really accelerate the ability of generics to get their products to marketplace to create more competition. I believe the president and the HHS secretary will lay out even more specifics in how to better bring down the cost of healthcare costs, specifically pharmaceutical drugs. And if you are a voter and you're looking at who's taking action in order to allow me to put more money back in my pocketbook, I think that there is the case to be made that could be a motivating factor when folks go to the polls.
So whether it's taxes, whether it's immigration, whether it's health care, what do you think the likelihood is that the Democrats will take over the House?
I think it's a coin toss. I would slightly favor Republicans, and here's why. They need 23, 24 seats. There's going to be a couple seats that Republicans actually take from Democrats. You can look and see about a dozen seats where Democrats are likely to win. But then there's about 24 seats that are really toss-ups right now. In most of those seats, you have incumbents, battle-tested, very savvy, experienced Republican incumbents who I think will get to the finish line and win because they have good teams around them. This is ultimately going to be, in the competitive suburban seats, a referendum on the president and how well incumbent members on the Republican side are able to differentiate and have their own brand so that they get those swing voters to vote for them.
So those of us in the media talk about this almost incessantly now. Do the Democrats take the House or not? Does it matter? What will actually happen differently if the Democrats control the House versus the Republicans, assuming for the moment Republicans hold the Senate?
I think that if the Democrats were to control the House, you would see a plethora of investigations, and you would see the far left side of the Democratic Party really pushing for impeachment. And whether you're talking about regulatory reforms, some of the economic growth measures that do have to make their way through Congress, some stuff gets done at the agency level, the opiates bill that we've passed and have been signed into law, you would have to see much more in the way of compromise, but you'd also see a lot more antagonism shown towards the president's policies, and it would just be that much more difficult to get things done.
So finally, as we enter these last 12 days, we're really down to the short straws right now. Given the rhetoric in the country and given this incident with these pipe bombs that have really been mailed around, should the Republican Party take it on themselves to ask the president to dial it back?
Oh, I think there's Republican members and people within the administration that encourage him not to say certain things and participate in certain tweets. He is who he is, and the reality is, in large parts of this country, he is culturally where a lot of voters are, and he does this stuff, and it drives some crazy, but there are those out there that absolutely love it, and they feel that he's speaking to their forgotten voice. Someone like me may take issue with things that he says or does from time to time. Others actually like it.